Diddy, Biggie, The Confessional, Part 3. Biggie and Tupac. Biggie and Tupac.
Tupac Shakur is a music legend. And for a long time, this community and worldwide have been wanting justice for Tupac. Today, we are taking that first step.
The courtroom buzzed with tension as Sean Diddy Combs, once the untouchable force behind Bad Boy Entertainment, sat at the defense table beside his attorneys. His polished suit and composed demeanor belied the seriousness of the moment. But the cracks in his empire were beginning to show. This wasn't just another celebrity on trial. This was a case that threatened to expose decades of hidden truths from the glittering, ruthless world of hip-hop, with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, a name once whispered in the margins, now squarely in the spotlight.
A man currently facing charges in the case, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, claims that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, paid for a hit on Tupac.
Keefe D was no ordinary witness. He wasn't chasing fame or looking to capitalize on a moment. He was a product of the streets, a survivor of the violent, turbulent era that defined 1990s hip-hop. He had long existed on the edge of legend, a name murmured in hushed conversations, alluded to in cryptic interviews, and embedded in countless conspiracy theories. But now he was no longer just a ghost from the past. He was the prosecution's linchpin, the man who could unravel one of the most notorious nights in music history. Keefe D's testimony wasn't just a narrative, it was a reckoning, one that threatened to shake the foundation of a hip-hop empire.
Named Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac's.
The trial centered on a single infamous night, September 7, 1996, the night Tupac Shakur was gunned down in a drive-by shooting on the Las Vegas Strip. For decades, his murder remained a haunting mystery, a grim symbol of the deadly East Coast-West Coast rivalry that once consumed hip-hop. But prosecutors argued this wasn't a random act of street violence. It was a meticulously planned hit, orchestrated by powerful figures within the music industry. Keefe D's testimony painted a stark portrait of betrayal, desperation, and money-driven motives, a world where loyalty was transactional and power ruled above all else.
Piece of a lot of what happened during direct testimony were freak-offs. And what the prosecution tried to show was that he forced and or coerced her into doing these freak-offs. And we've talked about this earlier this week, that at least my opinion is that in a lot of these, the prosecution just didn't close the loop. It was something she felt.
According to Keefe D, the chain of events that led to that tragic night in Las Vegas began months earlier. The East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't just hype. It was a smoldering conflict driven by pride, music, and the relentless pursuit of dominance. At the center were two powerhouses, Tupac Shakur, the fiery voice of Death Row Records, and Sean Diddy Combs, the polished mogul behind Bad Boy Entertainment. Tensions exploded when Shakur released a blistering diss track that didn't just criticize, it humiliated Diddy and his crew. Keefe D claimed this public assault, along with mounting provocations, drove Diddy to a breaking point. In gripping courtroom testimony, Keefe D recounted an alleged meeting where Diddy put a bounty on Tupac's head. Whether or not the amount was ever agreed upon, the intent, Keefe D insisted, was clear. Tupac was a threat that needed to be eliminated, not out of revenge, but for survival.
Two children in grade school that just hit it off and just hung out with each other all the time.
This wasn't just a story of two hip-hop titans at odds. It was a tale of quiet, calculated power plays made behind closed doors. Prosecutors argued that Diddy's alleged involvement was part of a broader pattern, using money and influence to control narratives, silence enemies, and, when necessary, remove threats entirely. They pointed to years of investigation, including Keefe D's past confessions and testimony from those once within Diddy's trusted circle. But Keefe D represented more than just words. He was a link to a hidden world most only knew through rumors. The defense, however, worked to dismantle his credibility, painting him as a self-serving figure with a criminal past, a history of deals for immunity, and a tendency to bend the truth. Still, the prosecution responded with hard-to-ignore details about the car that pulled up beside Shakur, the shots fired, and the motives that may have driven them.
What's trending in true crime nearly 30 years after the death of legendary rapper Tupac Shakur, the man accused of his murder is now claiming that Sean Diddy Combs once ordered a hit on the rap icon. In a recent court filing, a 2009 interview between police and Keefe D Davis is making headlines yet again.
Keefe D's testimony wasn't just a recounting of what happened that night in Las Vegas. It was a window into a culture where the lines between business and personal were dangerously blurred. It was a time when loyalty had a price tag, and the relentless pursuit of power often led to deadly consequences. The courtroom heard about the infamous casino brawl that took place just hours before the shooting, a violent clash that allegedly involved Tupac Shakur and members of the South Side. Crips, including Keefe D's own nephew, Orlando "Baby Lane" Anderson.
It may be some truth to it. But this dude is raping grown men. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can laugh at it, but, it sounds like it's true. I'm looking at it right now, and Diddy, he did go to prison, and he offered the inmate $2.3 million to settle the case, so.
They heard about the car ride that followed, the moment when Keefe D and his crew spotted Shakur's BMW and made a split-second decision that changed everything. But the trial wasn't just about that night. It dug deep into years of whispers and rumors swirling around Diddy and his empire. The prosecution laid out allegations of payoffs, cover-ups, and intimidation, claims that painted a damning portrait of a man willing to do whatever it took to protect his legacy. They pointed to past lawsuits, settlements, accusations from former insiders, and a mountain of circumstantial evidence suggesting a troubling pattern. This case wasn't only about Tupac Shakur. It was about a legacy built on secrets and silenced voices. Outside the courtroom, reactions were mixed. Some saw Keefe D's testimony as the missing piece, confirming what they had long suspected. Others dismissed it as too wild to be true. But regardless of belief, one thing was undeniable. The trial was pulling apart the carefully crafted image of one of hip-hop's biggest icons. It wasn't just about what Diddy might have done. It was about the world he embodied, a world where power and influence often came with a devastating price.
Right now, Davis is fighting for bail ahead of his murder trial, which he has pleaded not guilty for.
As the trial pressed on, the stakes grew higher than ever. This wasn't just about justice for Tupac Shakur. It was about the future of an entire industry, a culture, and a legacy. The courtroom drama was far from finished, and the questions it raised were only starting to surface. What other secrets lay buried beneath the surface, and how far would those in power go to keep them hidden? The answers, it seemed, were still waiting to be uncovered.
So why do you think they tied Diddy name to it?
Because it makes the East Coast and West Coast war works for the authorities and for the news media. Didn't no cops do that. It was an East Coast, West Coast war, and it was a drive-by shooting. It was never no damn drive-by shooting.
The turmoil surrounding Sean Diddy Combs extended far beyond the courtroom. While the trial was a pivotal moment, the cracks in his carefully constructed image had been forming for years, reaching well beyond the events of 1996. This wasn't just about one night on the Las Vegas Strip. It was about the empire Diddy had built and the bodies, both literal and figurative, left in its wake. The East Coast-West Coast feud might have served as the backdrop, but the unfolding story revealed a far deeper truth. Power in hip-hop came at a steep price, and Diddy seemed willing to pay it in full. The prosecution went beyond Keefe D's testimony, pulling at threads that connected not only to Tupac's tragic encounter, but also to a broader pattern of control, manipulation, and intimidation. Central to their case was the claim that the East Coast-West Coast rivalry itself had been fueled or even engineered by figures like Diddy and Suge Knight. For years, fans and insiders speculated that the feud was more than artistic rivalry. It was a calculated battle for dominance in a rapidly expanding industry. Now, with Diddy on trial, those suspicions were beginning to look like stark reality.
To come up with some kind of evidence, and they gotta have Keefe D say and point to some kind of evidence, which I don't think he could, that Diddy put out the hit on Tupac. Yeah, they gonna press him.
The rivalry between Death Row and Bad Boy was more than just a battle of words. It was a deadly game of power with real-world consequences. Diss tracks served as declarations of war, music videos became veiled threats, and every action was calculated to humiliate and weaken the other side. While fans saw it as entertainment, those on the inside understood the stakes were far higher. The trial exposed that Diddy's alleged role in Tupac's death wasn't simply personal revenge. It was a calculated strategy to secure his dominance in the industry. And if that meant eliminating a rival who had grown too dangerous, so be it.
Feds, Al Capone style, have not charged everything under the sun. They've charged 3 main charges: racketeering, sex trafficking, and the transport of a... And I'll tell you, I don't know about the racketeering charge. It's pretty sweeping. And I'll tell you what the general elements are.
The trial took a darker turn when court documents revealed that Diddy's power plays extended beyond rival artists. Witnesses described a complex network of enforcers operating behind the scenes, ensuring loyalty and silencing dissent. One former insider claimed that Diddy's inner circle wasn't just a group of close friends. It was a well-oiled machine carrying out his orders, no matter how extreme. This included alleged acts of intimidation that went far beyond subtle warnings. The prosecution suggested that rival executives and even journalists had been targeted over the years, with some reportedly receiving anonymous threats after publishing unfavorable stories or working with death row artists. Adding to the case was surveillance footage from industry events, which prosecutors claimed showed Diddy's team closely monitoring key death row figures. One clip shown in court allegedly captured members of Diddy's entourage trailing Suge Knight and Shakur at a Los Angeles nightclub just weeks before the Vegas shooting. While the defense dismissed this as coincidence, the prosecution argued it was part of a calculated strategy to gather intelligence and stay ahead of the competition. Though difficult to prove, these claims painted a portrait of a man not simply reacting to the feud, but actively orchestrating its most dangerous moments.
And the whole East-West thing started, we were caught off guard, and that broke my man's heart.
Perhaps the most chilling testimony came from a former Bad Boy employee who recalled overhearing a conversation at one of Diddy's extravagant parties, words that hinted at how rivals were handled. Though the language was vague, the meaning was clear. Diddy saw the feud as a high-stakes game with only one possible winner. This account added another layer to the prosecution's argument that the events of 1996 weren't just the result of a feud gone wrong, but the climax of a calculated plan. Whether the jury accepted these claims or not, one thing was undeniable. The trial was exposing just how far industry power players would go to protect their empires. The prosecution presented evidence painting a damning portrait of Diddy's rise. It wasn't just about hit records or glamorous parties, but about control. Former associates, some speaking anonymously, described a man willing to do whatever it took to maintain his power. There were whispers of payoffs, threats, and even surveillance of potential rivals. One witness recounted being approached by someone from Diddy's circle with a thinly veiled warning, a reminder to stay in line or risk losing their place in the industry. While unproven, these stories bolstered the prosecution's claim that Diddy's influence reached far beyond the recording studio.
The question is he a criminal? Is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law.
This wasn't just a rivalry. It was a battle for survival. The trial peeled back the layers to reveal the massive financial stakes behind the feud. Death Row Records and Bad Boy Entertainment weren't simply record labels. They were empires, each with millions on the line. One wrong move could mean the difference between industry dominance and complete irrelevance. In the ruthless world of 1990s hip-hop, dominance wasn't measured by chart positions alone. It was about respect. And losing that respect wasn't just embarrassing, it was downright dangerous. For Diddy, the stakes couldn't have been higher. According to the prosecution, that's exactly what drove his decisions. But the courtroom was only one front in this war. Outside, the trial reignited tough conversations about the darker side of the music industry. Fans, journalists, and insiders were forced to confront a harsh reality. The world they admired was often built on fear and exploitation. The East Coast-West Coast feud was just the most visible symptom of a culture where power was wielded as a weapon, and those who suffered the most were often the ones with the least to lose. The trial also exposed the personal toll of Diddy's alleged actions. While Tupac was at the center, the impact of that night in 1996 rippled far beyond him. Families were left to pick up the pieces, dealing with loss and trauma that no amount of fame or fortune could ever heal.
Now, Combs has long denied any involvement with Tupac. He's never been charged. Our question this morning, how believable is Keefe D's Diddy accusation?
For Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, the trial was a heartbreaking reminder of the son she had lost. For Biggie's family, it offered a chilling glimpse into the brutal world that had taken their loved one. And for the countless others caught in the feud's crossfire, it served as a stark reminder that the price of fame was often devastatingly high.
They saw evidence in the case. They immediately honed in on racketeering and they started saying, why is this racketeering with one guy? And they're charging this one guy. They had a real problem with that. They did not have a problem with the Mann Act. They found him guilty on the Mann Act. And they hung 6 to 6 on racketeering.
And then there were the fans. For years, they had idolized Diddy, the ultimate hustler who turned nothing into an empire. But now, many were beginning to question the price of that success. Was the man they admired simply a ruthless manipulator, willing to do whatever it took to stay on top? Or as the defense claimed, was he a victim of circumstance, caught in a tangled web of lies and betrayal that spun out of control? The truth, as always, probably lay somewhere in between. One thing was undeniable. The trial was rewriting the story of an entire era. As the proceedings dragged on, the stakes only grew higher. The prosecution hinted at more shocking revelations, teasing evidence that might link Diddy to other long-speculated incidents. Meanwhile, the defense intensified their efforts to undermine Keefe D, portraying him as a desperate liar with everything to gain. No matter the outcome, one fact remained clear. The world of hip-hop would never be the same.
You heard about Diddy law firm breaking ties with him and Miami Beach taking his day away?
Well, all the things that happened to Diddy and he losing friends, companies, cities, city names, city girls.
As the courtroom drama unfolded, the world watched with bated breath. This wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning for an entire industry. The question at hand wasn't simply whether Diddy was guilty or innocent, but whether the truth would finally be revealed. And if it was, what would that mean for the legacy of one of hip-hop's most legendary figures? But what do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for Diddy, or just another chapter in his larger-than-life saga? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, stay tuned, because this story is far from over.